I knew something had shifted the first morning Ryan Vale walked into the server room, wearing a tailored navy suit, spotless white sneakers, and the kind of confidence only inherited authority can buy. He stood in the doorway like he had entered a basement instead of the nervous system of a billion-dollar logistics company. His eyes moved across the server racks, the blinking lights, the cooling units, the cable trays I had personally labeled, repaired, replaced, and cursed at for 15 straight years. Then he wrinkled his nose. "This place feels outdated," he said. I looked up from the diagnostic screen and blinked once. "My name is Zinnia Blake," I said. "And this outdated place processes 40,000 orders an hour." Ryan gave me a thin smile. He was the founder's son, recently appointed acting CEO after his father's medical leave. 32 years old, expensive watch, business school vocabulary, zero understanding of what happened when a warehouse scanner stopped talking to the inventory database at 2 o'clock in the morning. "We're trying to move away from the old way of doing things," he said. "The company needs a cleaner, faster, more modern direction. Modern is fine." I said, "Broken is not." That was the first time his smile vanished. If you're curious how one outdated server room could bring an entire logistics empire to its knees before sunset, like this video, and tell me where are you listening from, and what time is it there right now, because what Ryan didn't know was already humming beneath his polished shoes for 15 years. I had been the invisible woman behind the machine. When payroll ran, nobody thanked me. When the website stayed online during holiday rush, nobody knew my name. When the payment gateways, warehouse robots, security firewalls, driver manifests, and customer portals all worked together like a living organism. Executives called it business as usual, but business as usual had my fingerprints all over it. Ryan didn't see that. To him, I was old equipment, a stubborn reminder of his father's era, a woman with too much knowledge, too many warnings, and too little patience for fashionable stupidity. He called it legacy thinking. I called it keeping the company alive. This story is fictional, but it was inspired by very real shadows that exist inside many workplaces. Some details were shaped with the help of AI to make the story more vivid, emotional, and easier to connect with. So listen closely, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Back then, Ryan was not in charge of anything except maybe his own reflection. The company was still run by his father, James Vale, the kind of man who wore work boots to board meetings and could smell a bad decision before the finance team finished presenting it. 10 years earlier, we had nearly lost everything. It started on a Wednesday morning with one frozen screen in the billing department, then another, then 20, by noon. The warehouse printers were spitting out blank labels. The customer portal was throwing errors, and every monitor in accounting displayed the same cold ransom message. Someone had gotten inside our network and wrapped their hands around the throat of the company. Consultants arrived in expensive coats and panic. They pointed at charts. They blamed vendors. They used phrases like threat surface and containment window, while the entire operation bled money by the minute. I did not have time to perform fear. I locked the network down, cut off external traffic, isolated the infected machines, and started rebuilding from backups I had kept in a fireproof cabinet because I trusted tape more than optimism. I slept in a chair beside the server racks for 3 nights. My coffee went cold, my hands cramped, but the company survived. After that, James called me into his office and asked one question. How do we make sure this never happens again? That was when Protocol Omega was born. It was not pretty. It was not trendy. It was not something Ryan would ever describe as modern. But it worked. The system treated my master administrator account like a heartbeat, every 48 hours. My identity had to confirm itself through an encrypted token sequence, not just a password, not just a badge, a living authorization chain tied to me. Zinnia Blake, because James trusted the person who had already dragged his company back from the dead. If my account was disabled without a formal transition, Omega assumed a hostile takeover, and then it would lock everything. When James Vale stepped away, after his stroke, the building changed before the systems did. Ryan's first decision as acting CEO was not to review disaster recovery, audit security, or learn how the warehouses actually breathed. No, he remodeled the executive floor. Glass walls, white furniture, inspirational slogans painted in gray letters, a coffee machine that cost more than my first year's rent. He called it creating a culture of innovation. I called it putting makeup on a power outage. Then he started removing people. He fired Marcus, the warehouse director, who could identify a loading delay by the sound of the conveyor belt. He replaced him with a routing algorithm that once sent 3 refrigerated trucks through a flooded service road because the map said it was optimal. He pushed out Denise from billing, who knew every vendor contract by memory, and brought in a consultant who kept asking where we stored the invoice app. Every week, another experienced person disappeared. Every week, Ryan called it progress. He spent millions on rebranding, new logo, new slogan, new website mock-ups with smiling stock photo drivers who had clearly never lifted a package in their lives. Meanwhile, the backup generators were overdue for maintenance. The warehouse scanners needed firmware patches, and our payment gateway was running on a configuration I had been begging to upgrade for 6 months. Whenever I raised a concern, Ryan smiled like I was a grandmother refusing to use a smartphone. "Zinnia," he said during one meeting, "we need fewer barriers and more momentum." "Momentum is great," I said, "unless you are accelerating toward a wall." That earned me my first note from HR about tone. After that, I became the woman who said no. No. We could not disable 2-factor authentication because sales found it annoying. No. Marketing could not have admin access to the live customer portal. No. We should not move critical shipment data to a startup cloud platform nobody had security reviewed. Ryan called me rigid. I called him reckless. And somewhere between those 2 words, he decided I was the problem. The signs came quietly at first, like hairline cracks in a dam. Meetings I used to lead suddenly had optional beside my name. Decisions about infrastructure were discussed in rooms I was not invited into. Emails arrived with my name copied at the bottom, never addressed directly, as if I were already a ghost haunting my own department. Then came Tyler. He was 26, maybe 27, with nervous hands, expensive headphones, and a resume full of certifications that looked impressive until you asked him to explain what they meant. Ryan introduced him as fresh technical leadership. Tyler introduced himself by asking if the server room had a wireless charger. I knew immediately what he was. Not a teammate, a replacement with training wheels. For the first week, he followed me around with a tablet, asking questions that sounded innocent if you did not know corporate language. Where are the root credentials stored? Which scripts are mission critical? Can you walk me through your emergency access flow? Do you have a personal checklist for system recovery? I gave him documentation for printer maintenance, old network diagrams, and a very detailed explanation of toner ordering. He looked confused. I looked helpful. Then, HR joined the performance. Linda Marsh called me into a Friday afternoon meeting. Friday afternoon meetings are where corporate souls go to be quietly buried. She smiled at me across the table with the warmth of an unplugged refrigerator. "Zinnia," she said. "Leadership feels there is an opportunity to improve collaboration." I looked at the paper in front of her. Performance Improvement Plan. There it was. The corporate guillotine, printed in 12-point font. The goals were ridiculous. Improve cross-functional alignment. Reduce incident response times by 50% without additional staff. Demonstrate a more positive attitude toward innovation. Complete full knowledge transfer to Tyler within 30 days. That last line was the only honest one. They did not want me to improve. They wanted me to empty my head into a binder, smile while doing it, and make myself unnecessary. I signed the acknowledgement, not agreement. Then I walked back to my desk, past the humming servers, and felt the truth settle cold in my chest. They were not planning to support me. They were planning to erase me that evening. I stayed after everyone left. The executive floor went dark first, all that expensive glass reflecting empty desks and fake plants. Downstairs, the server room kept breathing, fans spinning, drives blinking, the only honest sound in the building. I opened the secure archive and pulled up the document James Vale and I had written after the ransomware attack, Protocol Omega, version 2. It was not a memo. It was not a suggestion. It was a signed disaster recovery policy approved by the board, legal, finance, and James himself. Clause 4. A stated the important part in plain language, the primary incident commander, Zinnia Blake, must remain active until a qualified successor completes a 30-day parallel authentication period. Any removal without transition would be treated as a potential compromise and trigger automatic containment. I printed it. Then I printed the supporting risk assessment, the one explaining exactly what automatic containment meant. External traffic suspended, warehouse manifests frozen, payment gateways locked, internal certificates revoked, communications restricted, a total system lockdown designed to protect company data from theft, sabotage, or unauthorized takeover. I highlighted the clause in yellow until the paper almost glowed. The next morning, I walked into Ryan's office before my courage had time to cool. He was standing at his glass desk, reviewing a mock-up of the new company homepage. The slogan across the screen said, "Logistics without limits." I almost laughed. We had plenty of limits. He just refused to read them. "I need 5 minutes," I said. He sighed without looking up. "Make it 2. I placed the document in front of him. "This is the disaster recovery policy your father signed. If you remove my account without the required transition, Protocol Omega will interpret it as a security breach. The system will lock itself down." Ryan glanced at the first page. Not read. Glanced. Then he smiled. "Zinnia, this is exactly the problem. You keep acting like the company cannot function without you. I'm telling you the system cannot function if you ignore its rules." He picked up the document and dropped it into the recycling bin beside his desk. "We're rewriting legacy policies next quarter." I stared at the bin, and in that moment, I understood. He did not want the warning. He wanted the consequences. 2 days later, Linda appeared beside my desk with that careful HR expression people wear when they are about to ruin your life and call it process. "Zinnia," she said, "Ryan would like to see you in conference room A. Please bring your laptop." Of course he would. I looked once at the control dashboard. Every status light was green. Warehouses online, billing stable, payment processor healthy, security heartbeat active. Then I locked my screen and followed her. Ryan sat at the head of the conference table, scrolling through his phone. Tyler sat beside him with a notebook open and a face pale enough to qualify as printer paper. Linda closed the door behind me. Ryan did not waste time. "We're making structural changes," he said. "Your role no longer aligns with our strategic direction." I sat down slowly. "Translation," I said. "I am too old, too expensive, and too willing to tell you when your ideas will break federal compliance." Linda slid an envelope across the table. "Your termination is effective immediately," she said. "The severance offer is contingent on a smooth transfer of credentials and full cooperation." I looked at Ryan. There is still time to do this properly. Protocol Omega requires a transition sequence. If you disable my account before Tyler is authenticated as incident commander, the system will assume compromise. Ryan leaned back, annoyed. "Stop making this dramatic. Tyler has full certifications." Tyler stared at his pen. "Give him the keys," Ryan said. So I opened my laptop. The admin console loaded clean and quiet, like it had no idea it was witnessing betrayal. I created Tyler's superuser account, assigned full privileges, and transferred root ownership. A warning flashed across the screen. Exactly as expected. Primary heartbeat remains tied to Zinnia Blake. Transition incomplete. I turned the screen toward Ryan. Read that. He barely looked. Proceed. I clicked yes. Then Linda said, now disable your account. I typed the command, pressed enter, and watched my name turn inactive. Somewhere deep in the system, a timer began counting down. If you think Ryan Vale was right to fire me without a real transition, comment necessary change. But if you think it was a reckless betrayal, comment respect Zinnia. I want to know your side, because this is about trust. I walked out of the building at 2:18 p.m. with a cardboard box, my severance envelope, and 15 years of emergency calls still ringing in my bones. The afternoon sun was too bright. It made the glass headquarters look clean, almost innocent. I sat in my car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, and watched the entrance where I had walked in thousands of times before. Then I drove home. At first, nothing happened. That was the cruel beauty of Protocol Omega. It did not scream. It did not flash red across every screen at once. It simply waited, checked, failed, checked again, and then began removing trust from the system one layer at a time. By 3:15 p.m., the public website slowed. By 3:20, the shipment tracking page stopped responding. By 3:28, warehouse scanners across 3 states began showing the same message. System lockdown. Contact primary administrator. But there was no primary administrator anymore. In the northern warehouse, pallets stopped moving because the scanners could not verify inventory locations. In the southern facility, label printers froze halfway through shipping runs. Conveyor belts paused for safety when they lost connection to the central routing brain. Drivers sat in trucks with empty manifest screens, engines idling, deadlines burning. Then the payment gateway locked. Customer orders could not process. Refunds could not clear. Vendor invoices hung in limbo. The finance team watched transaction after transaction fail, while the dashboard turned from green to amber to red. At 3:45, internal email went down. At 3:50, the VoIP phone system followed. Now, nobody could call anyone without using personal phones. Managers ran through hallways. Warehouse supervisors shouted over radios. Clients began posting complaints online, asking why their deliveries had vanished. Every minute cost money. Every minute proved the same thing. Ryan had not removed an obstacle. He had pulled the pulse from the company. My personal phone started buzzing at 4:07 p.m. First, Tyler, then Linda, then a number from the executive floor I knew belonged to the boardroom speakerphone. I let the first few calls go unanswered. Not because I enjoyed it. Not exactly. I was standing in my kitchen, still wearing my work blouse, staring at the severance envelope on the counter like it had personally insulted me. Finally, I answered. Zinnia! Ryan's voice came through tight and sharp. What did you do? I almost laughed. I went home, I said. Per your instructions. The system is locked. That sounds serious. Do not play games with me. If you planted something, legal will bury you. There it was. Not a question. Not an apology. A threat. So I kept my voice calm. Ryan, Protocol Omega was approved by your father, the board, finance, and legal. It activates when the primary incident commander is removed without a qualified transition. I warned you. Silence. Then Gary Mercer, the CFO, cut in. His voice was lower, older, and much more afraid. Zinnia, is this fixable? Yes. Can Tyler fix it? No, Dad? In the background, I heard Tyler say something that sounded like, I tried rebooting the authentication server, and I closed my eyes. Gary, I said, tell him to stop touching things. Another voice joined, Alina Cross, General Counsel, calm, precise, dangerous, Zinnia. Are you saying this is not sabotage? I am saying the system is doing exactly what the company designed it to do. It detected an unauthorized removal of the person tied to its security chain. Alina went quiet. Gary understood first. She sent us the risk memo. He said faintly, Ryan, you replied to it. I heard papers moving, someone breathing hard, and Ryan losing the shape of his confidence. The panic in that room had finally turned into comprehension. At 6:12 p.m., a video meeting invite landed in my personal email. Subject: emergency resolution discussion. I almost deleted it on principle. Then I saw the attendee list: Ryan Vale, Gary Mercer, Alina Cross, 3 board members, and Robert Haynes, the chairman, who had once told me I was the only person in the building who scared the servers into behaving. I joined from my dining room table. Ryan looked pale. Gary looked exhausted. Alina looked like she had spent the last hour reading documents she wished someone else had read sooner. Robert did not waste time. "Zinnia," he said. "What will it take to bring the system back, finally?" Someone had asked the right question. "I will not return as an employee," I said. That ended when Ryan terminated me. Ryan's jaw tightened, but nobody let him speak. "I come back as an independent consultant. $500 an hour. Minimum 100 hours. Paid up front before I enter the building." Gary winced, then nodded. "Done." "Second," I said. "My termination is formally retracted. The company will state in writing that the decision was an executive error, not a performance issue. That goes into my personnel file and is sent to all staff." Ryan exploded. "Absolutely not." Robert's voice cut through him. "Absolutely yes," I continued. "Third, I get full authority over systems operations until the board appoints a qualified successor. No infrastructure changes, no access transfers, no cloud migrations, no security exceptions without my approval." Alina was already typing. "And fourth," I said, looking directly at Ryan, "you do not speak to me unless the board asks you to." The silence was beautiful. A wire confirmation arrived 20 minutes later. Only then did I stand up, grab my keys, and drive back toward the building that had finally remembered my name. The front doors were dark when I arrived. Ryan had to let me in manually because the badge readers were still locked inside Omega's little panic room. His vest was wrinkled. His eyes were red. He looked less like a visionary and more like a man who had finally met a consequence. I walked past him without a word. In the server room, Tyler stood beside the console like a child caught holding matches. The lockdown screen glowed red. "Authentication required." Gary handed me my token with both hands. I placed my thumb on the biometric scanner. The reader beeped. "Identity confirmed. Zinnia Blake." I entered the override sequence James and I had written years before, a line only the two of us knew, then pressed enter. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the red screen faded to amber. Then green. Database connected. Payment gateway restored. Warehouse certificates renewed. Communications online. The building exhaled. Somewhere. Scanners started beeping again. Trucks began moving. Bank files transmitted before the final deadline. Customers were angry, but not gone. The company survived. By Monday, Ryan was removed from operational authority and reassigned to brand initiatives, which sounded like a punishment wearing cologne. I became lead systems consultant, reporting directly to the board, billing more than double my old salary and approving every infrastructure decision. I did not destroy the company. I reminded it who had been keeping it alive. Never call someone legacy when they are the only person who knows where the heartbeat is hidden. Sometimes, the people who seem invisible are the ones carrying the weight of everything. This story reminds me that experience is not something to mock, and loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness. I walked away with 3 lessons. First, never underestimate the person who quietly keeps things running, because their value often becomes clear only when they are gone. Second, leadership without respect can destroy in one afternoon what others spent years building. Third, knowing your worth means staying calm, even when others try to erase your contribution. And what about you? Did this story leave you with a lesson of your own? Share it in the comments, because your perspective might help someone else feel seen, respected, and less alone. If this story touched you, please subscribe, Leave a comment, like the video, and share it with someone who needs to remember their value by passing it on. You are not just sharing a story, you are reminding someone that their work matters.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.